It was a gray morning, one of those when silence seemed to hang heavy in the air, the kind of day where even the wind hesitated to rustle through the trees. I recall the scent of cut flowers, the crushed wreaths scattered on the damp ground, and the muffled sound of footsteps across the grass. The sky wasn't weeping, but I was, grieving inwardly, my tears having already dried up in the preceding days. When the news reached me, I didn't scream. I didn't fall apart. I simply closed my eyes and allowed my entire world to shatter silently within me. She was gone. And no one at that funeral knew that the love of my life lay in that coffin. Our life together was a secret, you see. We existed in the shadows of a story that was never allowed to unfold in the light of day. She loved me with an intensity I had never known, yet when she chose to marry a man, I let her. I didn't fight. I didn't beg her to stay. She was afraid of her mother, the church, her friends, the small town's judgment. And I was afraid too. Afraid to plead for a love the world deemed wrong. Afraid of being left alone, exposed, judged. So when she said, "I have to do this," I responded with a simple, "It's okay." But it wasn't okay. It never was. That morning, of the funeral, I dressed just like everyone else. Black, discreet, hair pulled back, dark sunglasses to conceal my swollen eyes. I took a seat in the last pew of the church, feeling as though I was watching my own soul being buried alive. Up front, her widower wept. The family maintained a composed silence, their whispers hushed. And there I was. My chest shattered into pieces, my mouth full of unuttered screams. No one imagined what that woman truly meant to me. No one knew I had been her secret love for nearly 5 years. She met me when I was 19. She was 32. I was an intern at the place where she gave her lectures. Intelligent, elegant, always with that voice that sounded like poetry. Initially, I simply admired her, believing it to be a mix of admiration, respect, a kind of professional fascination. But when she invited me out for the first time, for coffee after a lecture, I realized there was something more. And it was over that coffee that everything began. Conversations turned into lingering glances, glances into touches, touches into nights. And those nights became secrets. We met in secluded places. No holding hands on the street, no photos together, no "good morning, my love" in public. It was always clandestine. I loved her even when it hurt, even when she said she could never openly acknowledge me. Even when she suggested that perhaps one day everything might change. But that one day never arrived. Instead, she got married. And I vanished. I pulled away. I cut off contact. I went to therapy. I pretended to move on. Until that very day. Seeing her face cold, motionless, pale, it shattered me once more. Because I never got to say goodbye. I never said, "I forgive you." I never said, "I understand you." I never said anything at all. And now, all that remained was this hollow ache in my chest and this silent rage, because the entire world mourned the wife, the daughter, the friend. But no one mourned what she and I had been. No one knew. No one saw. Only I did. After the ceremony, I lingered near the exit for a while, like someone waiting for something they know will never materialize. That's when an older woman with a steady gaze approached me. "You're Julia, aren't you?" she asked. My heart pounded. "Yes." "Why?" She sighed. "She told me about you. Not much, but enough for me to understand." I froze. I couldn't respond. "She kept a book with your letters. They're with me now. She asked me, before she left, to give them to you." And just like that, in the hands of that unfamiliar woman, lay everything I hadn't known, or perhaps hadn't wanted to know. If you, too, have experienced a love no one understood, share it in the comments. Your story might inspire someone today. And if this narrative resonated with you, subscribe to the channel. Come along with me to the very end. On the drive back home, the car's silence choked me more than any cruel word could. The small wooden box containing her letters rested on my lap as if a piece of our past had solidified into concrete in my hands. I was trembling, not from cold, but from an unnamed anxiety. I knew that within it lay things that could either heal me or shatter me further. I parked on my street, leaving the engine running for endless minutes, staring intently at the box's lid as if it would open on its own. When I finally mustered the courage, the first sheet I pulled out stole my breath. If you are reading this, it means I am no longer here, and I am so sorry for everything, Julia. Her handwritten words struck me like arrows to the chest, the trembling penmanship, the ink smudges, as if she herself had wept while writing. It was a letter of apology, but it was more than that. It was a love letter. She confessed she never went a day without thinking of me, that she dreamt of me in the early hours, even while sleeping beside someone else, that the songs, the scents, the places, all led her back to us. She claimed she tried to forget me, that she tried to be happy, but deep down, she never stopped loving me. Never. I leafed through each letter. Some dated years ago, others more recent. In every one, she wrote as if we were conversing. She'd ask about my work, if I still drank that cinnamon coffee, if I had adopted the kitten I wanted. And amidst these tender details came the pain. The regret. She confessed she lived in fear. Fear of being who she truly was. Fear of family rejection, of social exclusion from friends, of condemnation from the church. She said I was the only place she ever felt safe, and precisely because of that, she pushed me away, to shield me from her burden. Little did she know, the greatest burden was being left behind. I cried as I never had before. I sobbed, gasping for breath. I clutched that box as if it could bring back what I had lost. I remained there, sprawled on the couch, letters scattered across the floor, my heart in pieces, trying to comprehend why life is so cruel to those who genuinely love. Why must we conceal our love? Why can't two women experience a romance like any other couple? Why must we pay such a steep price to love in peace? In the days that followed, I began to relive everything. Every encounter, every touch, every farewell. I recalled our secret trip to Tiradentes, where we pretended to be just friends, yet looked at each other like lovers. I remembered the first time we slept together and her fear the next day, believing God would punish her. I used to tell her that love couldn't be a sin, that true love doesn't destroy, it builds. But she had been raised to believe it was wrong, that her happiness would inevitably be the unhappiness of others. And I tried to be strong, but I was merely a 19-year-old girl trying to grasp how love could be so intense and so forbidden simultaneously. I matured within that relationship. I grew immensely. And when she left, a part of me died with her. Yet there, with those letters in my hands, I began to feel something else, a kind of reconnection. As if she had left a piece of her soul with me, and now I had the mission to live for both of us, to honor what we felt, to tell our story. That's why, a week later, I returned to that church, the very same place where the funeral had been held. Alone. I sat in the last pew where I'd been before, but this time without dark glasses, without shame. I closed my eyes and spoke to her. You were the great love of my life, and even with all the pain, I forgive you, because loving you was worth it, always was. I felt a warmth in my chest, as if she had heard me, as if from somewhere she was smiling at me, finally at peace. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever lived a hidden love or carry a longing in your chest, comment below. And if you wish to follow other real stories like this one, subscribe to the channel. Next one might be yours. The letters became part of my routine. Every night, before sleeping, I would pick one up and reread it, sometimes in order, sometimes randomly, as if expecting a new response from the same handwriting. In each passage, I rediscovered layers of her I had never perceived while we were together. She was more fragile than she let on, more needy than she revealed, and far more passionate than she ever allowed herself to feel. It was as if, in the silence of those pages, she finally screamed everything she had swallowed for the sake of convenience, image, and fear. And little by little, I too began to scream inwardly. Not from anger, but from liberation. I started writing back. Not letters anyone would ever read, but letters that healed me. I began a new box, solely mine. In it, I recounted how I was coping with everything. I confessed my longings, my memories, my still open grievances. I also shared my progress, how I had returned to therapy, how I started talking with other women who had lived similar stories. I discovered a support group in the neighboring town, women of all ages who, like me, had been secret lovers, forbidden loves, stories without happy endings. It was in that group that I heard, for the first time, someone say, "We too need to grieve." And that's when I understood. I never had the right to mourn her aloud. I could never say she was my ex. I could never hold her hand in public, not even at her wake. One of the letters that resonated most deeply with me was the one she wrote right after her wedding. She described how, as she walked down the aisle, her dress felt like it weighed a ton, how the wedding ring burned on her finger, how, even surrounded by flowers and cameras, all she could think was, "Julia should be here." And it concluded with a sentence that pierced me like a blade. "I chose the life I was taught to live, but the love was you." That changed everything, because I realized it wasn't just I who had suffered in silence. She too was at war with herself. And in a way, that made us alike. Two women trapped in different circumstances, yet wounded by the same construct, fear. I began revisiting the places we had been. I retraced the path to the coffee shop where everything started. The familiar aroma of warm cheese bread, the bell on the door, the soft yellow light of late afternoon. I sat at the same table, ordered the same cinnamon coffee, and closed my eyes for a few seconds. It was as if she were right there, as if, for a moment, nothing had changed. And it didn't make me cry. For the first time, I smiled, because despite everything, the love had existed. And it had existed beautifully, even if hidden. It was then that I decided to write our story, not in the form of a book, nor a social media post, but as a testament, a video. I needed to tell it, not for exposure, but for liberation, because I knew other women lived in silence, just as we had. I knew there were so many Julias and so many hers out there, suffocating beautiful loves out of fear of the world. And if my story, however painful, could help someone accept themselves, love with more courage, heal, then it would be worth reliving it all. In the video, I spoke from the heart. I spoke as if I were conversing with her for the last time. I recalled our beginning, our fears, our sweet and bitter moments. I remembered the funeral, the letters, and I concluded by saying that today, despite everything, I wouldn't change a thing. Because loving her taught me to love myself. It taught me to respect my own time, my pain, my truth. And that I had finally understood. Grief is a part of love. And that loving, even in silence, is still loving. If you've made it this far, tell me, what touched you most in this story? And if, in any way, this account resonated with you, subscribe to the channel. There's still much more to be told, and you are a part of it. The video's reception was something I hadn't anticipated. I posted it without grand expectations, solely with the intimate desire to express something that had been tearing me apart internally. But within days, messages began pouring in from all corners. Women I had never met wrote to me, saying, "Thank you for telling what I could never bring myself to say," or "You gave me the courage to confront my own story." One woman shared that, after 20 years of living a lie, she decided to tell her wife that the great love of her youth was also a woman, and that she still dreamt of her. Another recounted how she never allowed herself to love someone of the same sex for fear of being rejected by her daughter, but after watching my account, she realized that true love should never be hidden. Those messages embraced me in a way no therapy had managed to do until then, and that's when something even more unexpected occurred. One of the messages arrived with a familiar name in the sender field. It was her sister. Yes, my ex's sister. It took me a few minutes to process before opening it. My hands trembled, my heart beat erratically. When I finally found the courage to read, I discovered a short text, yet laden with emotion. "Julia, I watched your video, and even though I didn't know everything, I always sensed there was something between you two. My sister suffered greatly, and I thank you for giving her the love she herself could never accept. If you wish to talk, I'm here." That completely undid me. It was as if, after so long, someone from her family finally acknowledged my existence, recognized our love. We arranged to meet for coffee. The same coffee shop where everything had begun, like a cycle that needed to close. When we met, her sister looked at me with tear-filled eyes and embraced me tightly. She said that after her sister's death, she began to reevaluate everything. The conversations, the silences, the glances her sister would cast my way whenever I appeared at work meetings or events. She expressed guilt for not having asked more, for not having listened better. She was even afraid of me, and I never wanted to be someone who instilled fear. We listened to soft music in the background, and between sips of coffee and discreet tears, an unexpected bond formed there, one of empathy, shared longing, and healing. That conversation made me realize something much profounder. It wasn't just our story that hurt, it was the silence surrounding it. What destroys loves like ours isn't the feeling itself, but the burden of what remains unsaid, of what isn't lived, out of fear of others. Life is too short to love in secret, and too painful to carry the grief of those we love alone. I understood that day that living your truth hurts, but not living it kills you from within. And perhaps she knew that, in the end. Perhaps that's why she wrote the letters. Perhaps that's why she left with me what she could never utter aloud. Over time, I started dreaming of her less often, not because I had forgotten her, but because the sharp pangs of grief began to soften into a gentle longing, the kind that makes you smile to yourself in the middle of the day, recalling a silly gesture, a funny phrase, an annoying habit that is now missed. Birthdays became less sorrowful, places ceased to be emotional traps, and one day, without warning, I found myself falling in love again. Not in the same way, not with the same intensity, but with a new maturity, with a heart that was no longer ashamed to feel what it felt. She will always be a part of me. She will be the chapter that changed everything. She will be the love that taught me what love truly is, even amidst errors and fears. And I carry that now with tenderness, with peace. Because living through that, grief, telling that story, opening those letters, all of it brought me back to myself. And perhaps, somewhere between what was and what could have been, she too finally found what she so desperately sought: freedom. If you've reached this point, you already know. This channel is a safe space for real stories. Like, comment on what resonated most with you, and subscribe. You are part of this, and your story matters too. Today, years after that funeral, that box of letters, that seemingly unbearable pain, I look back and understand that love doesn't always arrive as we expect. Sometimes it storms in, alters the entire landscape, and then departs, leaving behind traces, scars, but also lessons. no other kind of relationship could ever offer. Our story didn't have a happy ending, at least not in the traditional sense. There was no fresh start, no second chance, no reconciling embrace. But there was redemption. And in a way, that too is happiness. Because even without her here, I learned to love myself, to respect myself, to prioritize myself. And this was only possible because one day I loved someone who couldn't do that for herself. I keep the box of letters on a high shelf in my room, no longer as an altar of sorrow, but as a reliquary of memory. Sometimes I open it, reread a line, and smile. There are days when I cry, yes, because longing never completely vanishes. It merely learns to reside in a calmer corner of the heart. Other times, I laugh, remembering our silly quarrels, our absurd nicknames, the spontaneous trips that ended with us spooning in some quaint little inn. All of it was real, and I'm no longer afraid to say it. It was love. It was true. And even though the world never gave us permission, we lived what we could within the possibilities we had. Today, I share our story with other women who reach out to me. I've received hundreds of messages since that first video. Some simply come to express gratitude. Others to confide. I've heard stories so similar to mine, it almost seems there's a cruel pattern in how love between two women is pruned, silenced, discredited. But I've also heard tales of courage, of women who broke patterns, who confronted their families, who dove headfirst into love even with fear. And this gives me hope. Hope that future generations won't need to hide their letters in boxes. That they can love in the light of day, without funerals burdened with secrets, without kisses stifled in dark alleyways. Once, I asked myself if I would have done anything differently. And for a long time, my answer was, yes, I would have begged her to stay. I would have made a scene. I would have forced the world to acknowledge us. But today, I'm not sure. Perhaps everything happened as it was meant to. Because she needed to live that journey. She needed to confront her own ghosts. And I needed to grow, mature, strengthen myself. And that is precisely what occurred. Sometimes pain is simply life's way of pushing you towards your most courageous self. If she were alive today, I would say thank you. Thank you for loving me, even with fear, for leaving me letters, even in silence, for being my love, even in secrecy. I would say, I forgive you with all my heart, that I understand, that I respect her journey, and that I truly hope she has found peace wherever she may be, because I have found mine. And if you, listening to this story now, also live a love no one understands, don't give up on yourself. Don't hide. Don't diminish yourself. You deserve to be loved openly. You deserve to live a story where a happy ending is possible, even if it's not perfect. And if, by chance, life presents you with a difficult story like mine, write about it, speak about it, transform your pain into a seed. Because the world needs more true stories, stories like ours. And if this story touched you, if you felt it could have been yours, leave a comment below. I too have loved in silence. Let's create a chain of support, empathy, and true love. And if you wish to follow other stories like this, subscribe now. There's much more coming, and perhaps the next story we tell will be yours.